Hello again, and welcome back. If you're new here, there's a link to my website down below. If you're not, you'll notice I'm sitting down for my intro again. You want to know why? I'm not a huge fan of standing up. It's awkward, in case you couldn't tell. Also, if you couldn't tell, based on the opening segment, today we're going to be working on the Ghoul from the Fallout series. And in this video, we are going to be working on the shirt, pants, vest, jacket, bandolier, belts, plural, weathering, and we're actually not going to be making the knife, but we will be making the revolver and the shotgun. Why did I choose the Ghoul, might you ask? Well, not too long ago, I told myself, I really need to make something cute, something upbeat, something colorful, maybe something pastel, out of my comfort zone. And then I started watching the Fallout series, and then I saw the Ghoul, and I thought to myself, boy, do I want to make that. Now calm down, hold your horses, so to speak. I don't feel that way about the Ghoul. Ever since I watched the series, it's been kind of coming out that some people feel that way about the Ghoul. No, not here. I just like the cool character design. I want to look cool. That guy looks cool. Anyways, enough of that. Here's the making of. So let's just start by keeping in mind that I'm not making the clean version of this shirt, so I'm not too worried about the best possible construction method. It's also why I'm not too worried about the blue being incorrect. I just wanted to use some stuff out of my stash if I could. I still want to play around with the details from the clean version though, like the embroidery. This is what I had to work with as a reference though. And I know more close-up, crisp shots of all of this is going to come out in the future, but that's often the name of the game as a cosplayer. Either way, I'm tracing my front panel onto some paper and drawing a ruler for size accuracy. This way I can scan it and digitize the embroidery in my software. I think it went pretty well for a blurry image. I was a little off on some of my placement, but if I ever remake this, I'll just embroider the whole thing on an uncut piece of fabric first. Also, I got the back wrong, but no one will ever see it. Much like many of these details. Alright, so now I can begin assembly. On a clean version, I'd do some piping here as a transition between the panel and the fringe. I clipped the fringe here too at the seam allowance to avoid any unwanted sewing machine arguments. I'd also double my fringe. Again, it's inside my vest and jacket. No one even knows there's fringe on my shirt. I didn't realize how much my overlocker shook my desk so bad. So, sorry. And I won't pretend this is the only clip in this video that will be a little bit, bass boosted. Alright, so I just overlocked all the edges here, and now more assembly. I lied, here's some iron-on interfacing for the collar stand and the collar. We don't want a floppy collar. Okay, now assembly. If you've seen my Scourge series and possibly other videos, you'd know I like piping. And I will stop you right there. Not that kind of piping. Not for this. This is a very thin piping though, so I'm using this string I had. The zipper foot here is used to get close to the edge of the string, but I'm actually staying away from it by a bit, and you'll see why here in a bit. For the front edge, I'm sewing piping on the wrong side. More on that later. Here's a collar. So now I'm sewing the piping to the edge of the collar, close-ish to the edge, so that no one sees this line of stitching later on. To turn the corner, any corner, it helps to slash the edges a little bit, but not into the seam allowance zone. The reason why I'm basting this to the collar is so I don't have to worry about it slipping out later when I sew the other half. So now I can really push that piping as close to my zipper foot as possible to get the nicest, most even piping I can. The curves are a little bit tricky. I just stop, put my needle down, and check every couple stitches, and pivot the fabric on the needle. This is all very boring sounding information, but you know what isn't boring? How satisfying the result is. Not this result though, I had to go back in and get even closer to the piping. The rest of it is going into this front closure area, by the way. But we're making a collar, damn it, so time to connect the stand halves to the collar half, third of the pile, the stand thirds and collar thirds.
Take my 75% chance of winning and then add 66 and 2/3%.
Take my word for it, I sewed it. And now I'm ironing it. Collars with collar stands are a little bit strange. One half stays whole and the other half gets... Here's a diagram I prepared for you in MS Paint. So this half gets ironed inwards by the seam allowance, and then the collar gets sandwiched in there. The edge is only sewn from fold to other fold. That way you sew the non-folded edge to the shirt so that it folds back over, hiding the raw edge from the world and the eyes of the innocent. Hope that helped, because past me wasn't very helpful with the lack of footage. And you know, I'd bet money there's a really easy way to do this without hand sewing it, but I'm just going to mess around with the pins and the seam pit until I decide to look it up. So here we are, a cool guy, no sleeves Ghoul shirt. But we do need sleeves though, with embroidery no one will ever see. This is also all I had to work with. So it's probably not accurate, but it's something. For the buttons, I'm just sandwiching some elastic in there and sewing on top. To connect the two together, I'm just zigzagging over the edge. Something I've seen people do by hand when making historical undergarments. Again, I think I need to look up how to connect this type of cuff, but this works. If you're relatively new to sewing, have you ever wondered why sleeves look like they're a little bit too big for the sleeve hole? This is because it needs to be eased, and for fabrics that can't ease that much, you just need to gather it like this. But not so much that it'll sew in folds and look like a ruffled. To know where this was going to match up, I used chalk to transfer. So these are the same pants this man has been wearing since the nukes. This is the only pinstripe I could find in 2 whole fabric stores. Also, I didn't get enough of it, so I pieced some of it back together here behind the knee. And that's all you get to see for the pants, because I probably forgot to get the footage. But I do have other videos in which pants get made. I'm not gonna put anything there. I don't know how. The vest, however, is next. But first, a word from our sponsor, Nuclear Warfare. Thank you, Nuclear Warfare, for sponsoring this video. Without the concept of nuclear warfare, there wouldn't be the Fallout games. And without the Fallout games, there wouldn't be the Fallout series. And you see, without the Fallout series, there wouldn't be the Ghoul. And then there would not be this video. Or my cosplay. I don't know if you care about the video. All that to say, this video is not sponsored by a VPN that would probably not protect you anyways from purchasing nuclear warfare on the internet. And with that said, back to the video. I'm not lining it since I don't want to die of heat too much. I'm using fake stretch leather and just getting right into seaming it together. I did try it on and decide to add a middle back seam though to improve the fit. Now it actually fits the curve of my back. Once I had the proper shape of the front, I made a facing. To iron this type of fabric, since it will melt with the heat, just shield it with a different type of fabric. If you don't have a walking foot, using this very thin, tearable interfacing works to avoid the presser foot gripping to the fake leather. And by terrible, I don't mean it's terrible, I just mean it rips off. I still want the edges to look clean though, so the edges were trimmed, folded inward, and top stitched. For the jacket, I'm using linen. As you can see here, it's got a linen-like texture, which would make sense for a warm temperatured area. It was a pretty nice pattern. I liked it. My machine was not fast enough for me though. These gores are going to add some more volume for the bottom of the jacket. I did want to add a little bit more feminine shape to the character's design, which is why my pants are a little bit more form-fitting and the jacket will have more shape to it. So, it'll need to be taken in at the waist some. The lining gets all of the same treatment except for the facing at the front and the bottom edge of the sleeve. This way, the bottom edge of the sleeves will only ever be visible as the brown linen. Before I can connect the lining to the outer pieces though, I needed to finish up the pockets. Luckily, these pockets were just a square and a rectangle sewn to the outside of the jacket. I did interface them for added strength though. This is the collar. It ended up being a little bit too big, but that's okay. I'm not going for an absolute perfect replica. And now the collar and the lining can be connected together. This is a pretty large stack of fabric, by the way, so it was a little difficult to get footage of everything I was doing since half the time I couldn't even see what I was doing. And now, much like the cool guy's shirt from earlier, this too needs sleeves. I wasn't going to top stitch this at first, but it looks like it is in the show, so here we go with some top stitching. The sleeve seam allowance is overlocked, by the way, and now all that's left is the buttons and buttonholes. I didn't really need to test the size since these are always going to remain buttoned open, but it's usually good to test your size. And speaking of buttons, these happen to be in my stash already. Did you catch what words I mouthed there? I know you did.
I wanted to be a cowboy, baby.
My favorite part, weathering and aging. I'm starting by tearing up the bottom edge of the jacket, including the lining. I then threw it in the washer and dryer to further fray and fuzz up those ripped edges. So here's the difference between the brand new shirt versus the aged and dirty shirt. I tried achieving that by staining it with coffee. Didn't work. Then I upped my game here and made some acrylic paint water to dip it in. But it wasn't enough, so I made it even stronger. And now it was acceptable. I tried doing the same thing to the bottom of the jacket, but it didn't really work, so I'll have to tend to that later. For now, let's put that aside and make some guns. Not real ones, 3D printed ones. I'll try to find the links to the files I got for these. I don't know how to 3D model things myself. But I've been having fun messing around with my 3D printer and seeing hands-on what it's like to prepare a print for paint. You don't really need footage of people going nuts on a print with sandpaper, but we used 80 grit for areas that wanted to fight, and anywhere between that and 220 for the rest. To connect all the bits, I'm using some super glue and activator spray thing I got at Canadian Tire. My friend told me what to get. Once everything is connected, the next step should have been filler. I'm using Bondo, but I forgot, so I did that next step already, which is spray some automotive filler primer. Also, before anyone comes for me, I'm going to keep using ungloved fingers for stuff like this. Anyways, these props need to be holstered, so let's work on that. Starting by my bandolier. I'm not a leather worker, so I'm going to be using fake upholstery leather. After staring at the thing in reference images for a long time, and phoning a friend, so to speak, I found that this particular one is likely made similar to this, except this one is slightly more cracked out, since its edges can't be worked like leather ones can. We'll make it work though, I just have to turn some edges inwards. And yes, glue guns are okay to use in cosplay. I'm unsure when glue guns got a bad rep, but if used modestly, who cares? Just don't burn yourself. Or do. I am not your mother. This was some tough footage to get, but I basically snaked that through these slits and glued them into place with the shells to get the proper size. I also had a limited amount of rivets to work with, so I had to be strategic. Here's the cracked out part. I'm gluing another strip down the middle, and then turning those outer edges inwards and gluing them also. And hey, luckily for you, there's no base boosted footage of me hammering holes into the edge here, but I did use some leatherworking tools to facilitate the process. Before that though, a way to close the bandolier around me. It's just going to stay closed though. I put it on like a sash, like some kind of crispy looking Miss America. So now I can make the holsters. There's one on his back for the Winchester and one on his hip for the revolver. For that though, I need to awkwardly fold paper around my props. I don't really need to offer much more in terms of an explanation. A triple stitch for added boldness and detail. And again, because this isn't real leather, I have to do some weird facings to have it be leathery looking on both sides. And both holsters have a little belt on them to keep everything stabilized. The one on the back goes around the bandolier, and the one around the hip goes around the leg. You don't want your guns flapping around. This belt was obviously very fun to turn inside out, but it got the same exact treatment as the rest. Also, I thought it would slide down my legs, so I added this little strap. Don't need it though. I forgot I had a butt. Now remember those holes I mentioned earlier? This detail is not in the original, but I really wanted to saddle stitch the edges of the bandolier. It's my bandolier after all, and I can do what I want to it, damn it. Accuracy in cosplay tends to become a big whole thing, and it doesn't need to be. You don't see Marvel making comic accurate costumes for screen, right? And this is coming from someone who does contests. You want to add to the design? Go for it, bud. Okay, we took a little break from it, but back to painting, weathering, and aging. I'm not too sure what this is here on the design, so I've gone and mixed some Plasti-Dip with some black paint. I know it's probably some carvings of some sort, but I can't tell from the pictures we currently have available. And as you can see, everything was based in black, so I'm just dry brushing a semi-translucent silver paint to build up a nice worn color. My paint job is going to differ a little bit from the original because I have my own style and my own way of going about it. I'm going over it again just along the edges to add some definition. This 3D model had spinny parts, which I appreciate. For the wood surfaces, I built them up a little bit at a time, starting with a darker base and then dry brushing lighter colors until I was satisfied. The silver parts got shaded as well with watered down black acrylic. I wanted to add some dirt and rust to my prop, so I mixed a brown paint with a sort of pumice. And I only want hints of a rust stain, so orange paint did just fine. I realized later that the barrel half also needed that texture, but that's okay. Instead, I'm painting on this thick coat of various brown tones to give it a bit of a wood grain effect. So I don't know if you noticed here, but my barrel here was a little bit short and didn't connect. That's my fault. I did my measurements wrong when cutting the 3D model to make it as short as the one in the show. So why not just wrap that part in duct tape? And then make the duct tape look like it's been there a while too. Now for anything faux leather, I'm using Angelus Leather acrylic paint. I love this stuff and it has never let me down. You can water it down too, which I do for anything I'm trying to build up or add texture to. You have to work somewhat fast though, and sometimes a little goes a long way. I've also got some brown Angelus so I can lighten up a few areas, and then I can mix in a bit of white to define those edges. The belts and holsters get the same process done to them. I also started scratching some of it away to give extra worn details. I really liked the scratched up bits here, but they'll be covered by my holster. This one was fun. Now I don't have the luxury of beautiful burnished edges with fake leather, so I decided to paint the edges black to kind of mimic the look. And of course some more edge defining. It won't look this harsh in pictures or video, but it'll help the different edges stand out from the rest. Now, I know this seems weird, but I like to shade and highlight suede-like textures with powders. This is a cheap makeup palette, and I lock it in with hairspray. Shout out to Parkers & Quinn for the hairspray to lock in dusty things move. And now, the jacket. Again, my paint water thing didn't work, but that's alright, I needed to airbrush all of this anyways. And if you don't have an airbrush, you could always mix some watered down paint into a spray bottle. Remember that time I just shouted out Parkers & Quinn? Also, shout out to her for telling me about this crinkle the fabric airbrush on an angle move. I'm quite happy with how this jacket turned out, and I think I'll still at some point go throw myself in some dust outside and lock it in with some hairspray. And now, the cosplay's assembly may begin. These shells were 3D printed, by the way, and there's small versions of them glued into my revolver. You could bet I was pretty stoked at this point seeing it all come together. It's not always that I'm really excited for a cosplay. And you know what? Other than the makeup, this is so comfortable. And I feel super cool. But it wasn't over. I needed new spurs, a new belt buckle, more dust, and this belt needed extra little details. And maybe some more things sometime in the future too. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, as usual, the links are down in the description. I do stream on Twitch, so if that's something that interests you, you want to see live progress, or you want to ask me a question, or you just want to hang out and chat, links are down below for that as well. There's also links to the Discord. We want to see what you've made, whether it's from Fallout or something else, or a completely different art style. Join up in the Discord and come hang out. I don't know what that word was that I just said before I said Discord. Do that too. Now, of course, this is usually where I would tell you the things I plan on changing about the costume, but I already have, so we can skip over that. And we're gonna skip right on to the Twitch subscriber shoutouts. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you as always. Here's your names up on the screen. They're there for a little bit, and they are gone. Thank you so much, guys. And until next time, you guys take it easy. And of course, Godspeed. I lied, there is actually one thing that I plan on changing, and that's the makeup, and it had nothing to do with this video, but my face hurts, so I'm gonna learn how to make some prosthetics. Okay, bye. I don't know what this is.